And remember that this is a very rigorous kind of test, because this is a test of failure. We will be stressed until we fail. We will be stressed until we die. That's what this place is. A very rigorous kind of testing. Okay? So this is why all of this has been developed over the last several thousand years. Or the last 8,000 years that we know of. Probably much, much earlier than that, but 8,000 years that we can document in the public record. So if it's a test, like I said, it's a very rigorous test, and it is a test of failure, and it could be, you know, if the archons are involved, it's a cruel test, intended simply to torture us. I mean, if we come forward to some of the more colorful kinds of Christian tracts in early America, okay, we get sermons with the title of we are like sinners in the hands of an angry God, okay, and the image that is presented is of a spider on the end of its web being slowly lowered into a flame. Okay, sinners in the hands of an angry God. If we take a look at the Old Testament, now the Gnostics, one of the things that the Gnostics were objecting to, and that they were trying to point out with their concept that the God of this place is insane, was the historical concept that the Israelites had of their God. If you take a look at the descriptions of the behaviors of the God of the Old Testament, okay, you are looking at a psychopath, clearly. I mean, this God is jealous, this God is cruel, this God is vindictive, this God is vicious, this God turns its back on you if you don't do exactly what it says. The God of the Old Testament is nasty. Okay? And so the Gnostics were attempting to say, yeah, but that God is not really the God that created us. That's just one of these insane demigods. That's just one of the archons. So that was one of the things that they were trying to do. Okay? And one of the debates that went on for some time at the council, at the first council of Nicaea, was, do we include the Old Testament in our new Christian religion? Ultimately, they decided to do it for historical reasons. But they were debating, you know, because the Gnostics were, you know.
But there was an Old Testament and a New Testament.
Yes, and they were saying we don't want the Old Testament. The Gnostics were saying we don't want the Old Testament. That's, you know, this is the New Testament for the new religion, for the new gospel. We don't like all of that, you know, hell and damnation, brimstone, and all that stuff. We don't like that. We like this new idea. Okay, which is why the New Testament talks about, you know, love and all these other kinds of things, and the Old Testament talks about, you know, laying waste to entire.
More like Moses' laws.
Yes, the Mosaic laws, exactly. And the descriptions of, you know, like the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay? You know, fire raining down from heaven, which probably was an actual physical occurrence. We now have data that indicates that there was, in fact, an asteroid strike right around 3129 BCE, okay, in the Swiss mountains, that would have, if it were big enough, would have rained fire on Sodom, Gomorrah, and the other 4 cities that were destroyed.
Pardon me, what was the date again?
31, I think, I'm going to have to go check the date, but like 3129, 3126 BCE. And they've actually gone back and taken a look at some of the other data that corroborates this. Like, for example, if that happened, there would have been a cooling period, and there was. The ice cores show that globally there was a massive freeze-off that followed. And what followed almost immediately after that was the desertification of the Middle East, because it caused such devastation. Prior to that, there would have been, you know, forests and tilled land and all this other stuff. After this event, desert. So that probably was a historical event. The actual event as described in the Old Testament was written down about 1800 BCE. So it's like 1,800 years after the physical event would have occurred. But in the British Museum, there is a clay tablet that was created by a Sumerian astronomer. Okay, so this would have been someone who was, in modern-day Iraq, over there looking at the sky, and they recorded on this disc the passage of a low star. And so they were able to take a look because the astronomer had actually drawn the star map. So based on that star map, they put it into the computer and said, okay, trace it back until the sky would have looked like that. And that's where it went back, 3129 or 3126, whatever it was. And then they take a look at the actual events that happened, and so that's probably what happened. Okay, again, all of this is based on fact. Even the myths are based on fact that we can experience. So keep that in mind. Even the myths will guide us to the true reality. They're not just fairy tales. They're not just stories to tell the kids. They're actually teaching instruments. Okay, now, Seminar 4, we're going to move ahead. We're going to shift from metaphysics and ontology to epistemology. Everything up until this time, everything up until Descartes, Spinoza, and Leibniz, and Berkeley, has been devoted to a discussion of what is real. What's real? Now, Descartes' answer was a thinking substance and an extended substance. Berkeley's answer was a thinking substance. Spinoza's was a material substance. Okay? So these are the ontological answers to the question, what is real? But now we're getting to the point where we have to answer the question, how can we know what is real? And these problems are raised by Descartes. Because of the Cartesian method, with its implications, there are now serious questions that need to be answered about how we can know anything. Okay? So we will take a look at David Hume, the Freemasons, because they're keeping alive the ancient mystery religions, and Immanuel Kant, as we switch from metaphysics to epistemology. So remember our modern classification. Metaphysics is the theory of being. Ontology is the nature of reality. There's teleology. Cosmology, soteriology, and epistemology is the theory of knowledge. So it really doesn't exist in a concrete form until David Hume, because it wasn't necessary. Everything that was happening was assumed that we knew what was going on, that our experience was in fact real and true, and all we had to do was report it and reason from it. Now they're saying, okay, Descartes sort of thrown a kink into that idea. We actually have to start taking a look at how we know things. All right, in the historical context, this is the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution, from 1750 CE to 1850 CE. So we had major shifts, major changes, technological advancements in agriculture, mining, manufacturing, transportation, technology, education, everything. Society has completely changed. Let me rephrase that. Western society has completely changed from the ancient world during the Industrial Revolution. And it is also the beginning of the empirical and formal sciences. Astronomy, chemistry, physics, measurements, math, logic, medicine, psychology. So this is the beginning of science in the Industrial Revolution in the Western world. All right, David Hume was born in 1711 and died in 1776. He is the first of the empiricists. And that comes from the Greek word empiria, which means experience, or experiment. And this is the way that Hume wants us to think about it. It is an experiment that we conduct, that a human consciousness conducts, empiricism. Okay? Looking at the facts of experience. Okay? Even if there's no reality out there. Okay? What we are experiencing is still data. And that is what we are going to experiment with. His method he called academic skepticism to contrast it with the Cartesian, methodical skepticism. He was also the first psychologist. He proposed as his very own invention, and he uses that term, the association of ideas. which accounts for our beliefs in order, space, and time, major categories of our experience. All right? And in this book here, this is an inquiry concerning human understanding. Okay? The first volume that he published on this particular topic was called The Treatise of Human Nature. And it was really hard to read. People did not like it. It wasn't published. The general public hated it. The critics hated it. Other philosophers hated it in general. Okay? So he said, okay, I'll make an easier version. I'll make the Cliff Notes version, basically. And so that's what this is. This is an inquiry concerning human understanding. And here he sort of makes, a little bit easier to understand what he's talking about. He says, everything that we have been thinking about from the beginning to the present relies upon our belief in cause and effect. The order of the universe, the regularity of the universe, mathematics, chemistry, physics, everything, including our experience, relies upon this notion of cause and effect, sequences of events that are causally related. And he said, now, we have to take a look at that because Descartes has shown that we can doubt that. We can doubt cause and effect. Not only that, but his doubt is correct. The fact that we come in here and flip that switch over there and the lights come on nearly every time does not guarantee that the next time we walk in and flip that switch, the lights will come on. There's absolutely nothing that guarantees that. Okay? Absolutely nothing that guarantees that. There's nothing even that guarantees the sun will rise tomorrow morning. All we have access to is data that indicates a series of events that seem to have a regularity to them. And from this we abstract out what we call the laws of nature. But there is no proof of cause and effect. Can't do it. No way, no how can we do it, according to Hume. And he says, the analysis of this leads to the conclusion that we believe the universe is orderly only because of custom. And he uses that term custom, because we are accustomed to thinking and believing that cause and effect obtain. Okay? So in other words, he's saying it's psychologically necessary that we have this belief in cause and effect. Otherwise, no knowledge or practical effort would be possible. If we did not believe in cause and effect, even though it can be demonstrated that that belief is erroneous, we would stop doing anything. Okay? Likewise, for our beliefs in mind and matter, space and time, God, you name it, whatever our beliefs are, they are there because it is psychologically necessary, not because it is causally necessary. All right, so he is now applying his methodical skepticism, his academic skepticism, to the problems of cause and effect, and is now saying, wait a minute, we need to take a look at the psychology of human beings to understand what's going on here. Now this is a shift. How are these things explained by Leibniz and Spinoza and Descartes? God. Yes, it's the mind of God that does all this stuff. So I don't have to worry whether it's real or not, because God takes care of it. And so by appeal to this ultimate authority, I don't even have to worry about it as part of my philosophical system. But Hume is saying, yeah, we do have to worry about that. Descartes has put us in a position where we now have to think about this, because God is no longer an answer. Okay? We have to look at the psychology of human beings. We have to look at epistemology, the theory of knowledge. How do we know things? Okay? So this is David Hume. Now the Freemasons are contemporaneous. They start right about the same time as him. He is born in 1711. The first of the openly declared public lodges opens in 1717. So the Freemasons now, they're a secret society. They're derived from the Knights Templar according to modern research. They have secret initiation rituals. They practice meditation, hypnosis, various physical kinds of things. Their first public lodge, 1717 CE in London. So this is now a source of information about the ancient mystery religions that is available to modern man. They're coming out in the public. If you were to take a look at the writings that had carried along this tradition from the ancient times until the times of the Masons, they were hard to read. They were deliberately obscure. Okay, but now it's coming out into the open, and they're bringing that kind of information out to the public. Even though it was a secret society, most people, let me rephrase that, most men, okay, could have access to the first 3 grades. Okay? So you could have access to the ancient mystery religions and their doctrines and their training and their teachings if you were willing to go through the initiations and become a Masonic brother. Okay, now they did have organizations for women and kids, but, yeah, exactly, you know, okay. And I can't remember, what is the girls? Job's daughters, yes, Job's daughters, yeah. So they had things for the kids. And, you know, but the men were the ones who were initiated into the secret. Yeah.
Did they all go through the initiation? Because my dad is a Mason.
Yes.
So he had to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, he would have gone through the initiation rituals. Yeah, however, whatever level he is at, he would have gone through a ritual for each additional level. Okay? Well, like I said, the first 3 were open literally to almost anyone. You would be recommended by your neighbor, who was also a member. Okay, and then you could be initiated into the first 3 without any, you know, unless you were blackballed, which was unlikely. But you could. So it's now open. It's now available to more and more people. So this is one of the ways how we understand the ancient mystery religion, because this is one of the ways that it is revealed. Okay. Now, Kant was born in 1724 and died in 1804, so he's just a little bit behind David Hume. He developed a system of philosophy called transcendental idealism. He said that he was awakened from his dogmatic slumber when he was about 50 years old by Hume's skeptical arguments regarding causation, custom, and the association of ideas. So he was a philosophy professor, and a very well-renowned one. He published a lot of things. He was very well regarded. And, you know, here he is 50 years old, and all of a sudden, he gets a hold of the treatise, and he reads it, and he understands it. And he says, whoa, Hume's right. Hume is absolutely right. That means the only kind of information that we have is probabilistic information. Nothing is certain anymore. And without certainty, you can't have metaphysics. If you cannot have certain knowledge, you cannot have metaphysics. Okay, so transcendental idealism attempts to rescue metaphysics from Hume's criticism, which reduces knowledge to probabilistic knowledge only. No certainty. Okay? You've got to have certainty for metaphysical judgments and certain knowledge. That is knowledge which is certain. Absolutely certain. All right? His first attempt was called the Critique of Pure Reason. This book here. Like Hume, it was too difficult and abstruse. Everybody hated it. Nobody liked it. Nobody read it. Okay, so the publisher stopped publishing it. So he said, well, fine, be that way. I will go write the crib notes for it, you know, the cliff notes. And he called that the prolegomena to any future metaphysics. Okay, so anyway, in Kant, he talks about, basically, there are 2 kinds of statements. He's not going to use an analysis of language to try to understand how we know things. So there are 2 types of statements, an analytic statement and a synthetic statement. An analytic statement is one in which the predicate is contained within the subject. I'll show you that in just a second. Okay, a synthetic statement is empirical. It's based on experience. There are 2 kinds of knowledge. There's a priori knowledge, that is knowledge that is innate. A priori, before or prior, is knowledge that happens before the fact. A posteriori is through experience only, that is, it's after the fact. Therefore, there are 4 kinds of judgments. an analytic a priori judgment, an analytic a posteriori judgment, which Kant dismissed as being logically impossible, okay, and unnecessary. So we can forget that. There's a synthetic a priori and there's a synthetic a posteriori. Okay? Now, your analytic a priori makes sense because they both are describing different kinds of things. Things about which we do not have to look to experience in order to understand. All right? Synthetic a posteriori, they make sense too because they're descriptions of things that we have to look to experience. But then you've got this synthetic a priori thing down here. And he said, this is where metaphysics lies. Let's see what kind they are. An analytic a priori is, all bachelors are unmarried. So the predicate, unmarried, is contained within the concept of a bachelor. Okay, so you wouldn't have to know, all you'd have to know is the definition of the terms to realize that this is a true statement. Okay, a triangle has three sides. Again, the definition of triangle includes three sides. So these are analytic a priori kinds of statements. Synthetic a posteriori, it is raining. Well, let's go and see. So it'll either be confirmed or disconfirmed. It's 4 o'clock. Again, we just take a look at the clock and find out. And so these are the kind of things that we have to go back to experience to confirm or disconfirm. All right? Now, synthetic a priori statements, they're a different kind of a thing here. Arithmetic statements like 12 plus 13 equals 25, Kant says, are synthetic a priori. They're not analytic because the concept of 25 is not contained in either 12, 13, or plus. Because you can do a lot of other things with 12, 13, and plus. Okay? You see, so there's a whole bunch of other things we can do with this. It's not a simple one-to-one relationship like it is with the analytic a priori. All right? Likewise, 3 plus 2 and the square root of 25 and 5, they all refer to the same thing. But the different ways of representing them and arriving at them, okay, I mean, to perform a square root operation is different than performing an arithmetic operation. Okay? They provide new information about the relations of the numbers. Okay? Once you know the rules of arithmetic, we can calculate any sum, product, or quotient without reference to anything in the real world. So therefore, 3 plus 2 equals 5 is a synthetic a priori statement. So it is a priori in the sense that we know how to, once we understand the language, it makes sense to us. But synthetic because it gives us new data, it gives us new knowledge. It allows us to do things in the real world, in the extended world, that we would not have been able to do beforehand. And he's saying this is the foundation for a certain kind of knowledge that is what is necessary for metaphysics. Any questions about that? We're sort of blazing through this.
Yeah.
Okay? And like I said, this is the I'll read it to you here, just so you can get an idea of the flavor. Our knowledge springs from two fundamental sources of the mind. The first is the capacity of receiving representations. Okay? In other words, our perceptions are representations of the external world. The second is the power of knowing an object through these representations. Spontaneity in the production of concepts. Through the first, an object is given to us. Through the second, the object is thought in relation to that given representation, which is a mere determination of the mind. Intuition and concepts constitute, therefore, the elements of all our knowledge, so that neither concepts without an intuition in some way corresponding to them, nor intuition without concepts can yield knowledge. In other words, we need both things. We need concepts which are on the side of mind, and we need representations which are on the side of objects. And then he has this famous phrase. These two powers or capacities cannot exchange their functions. The understanding can intuit nothing. The senses can think nothing. Only through their union can knowledge arise. Okay? Thoughts without content are empty. Intuitions without concepts are blind. So he's saying that we can now rescue metaphysics from skepticism because we're now following up on that idea of Hume's, that these are psychologically necessary. everybody out there thinks cause and effect is real. Why? We thought it's a real forever. It doesn't matter whether we're Socrates or Plato or a Gnostic or a Buddhist or a modern person. We behave as if cause and effect are real. Why? Because Hume says it's psychologically necessary. In other words, there's something in the constitution of the mind itself which makes it necessary that we have the belief in cause and effect. Kant is now taking that idea and saying, yes, this is the clue. This is how we'll rescue metaphysics. Because it's absolutely necessary that we have, okay, concepts with representations, concepts with sense data. The two things. We have to have both in a synthetic a priori judgment before we can have anything going on. And those are certain judgments. Those are absolutely certain. We can be certain of our conclusions based on those judgments.
I think it has some truth in it, because if you analyze the behavior of mass or group psychological, you know, they all, without a prior meetings, they kind of react the same way in so many ways.
Well, these are probabilistic. Okay, so we're now a little bit further along the line than we were with Kant. Okay, because this is the beginnings of modern psychology. All right, and they're not talking about, they haven't done the analysis yet of like group movements, mass movements, and things like that, which we have a probabilistic calculus in order to determine what their behaviors are going to be. Okay, this is the beginning of that. This is just the very beginning of this, where they're saying, look, we've now got to rescue ourselves from solipsism and skepticism and all these things which threaten to derail us. Because if we can't have certain knowledge, we might as well pack it up and go home. Because we're done. We're done philosophizing. All right? And everything that has gone before us, you know, is essentially nonsense because we can't prove it. Okay. Experience, therefore, is a combination of synthetic judgment provided by our senses, which are then organized by the mind, the soul, you know, the consciousness, whatever, according to a priori categories, such as space, time, number, color, solid, liquid, whatever. So it's the combination of these two things in a synthetic a priori judgment that gives us knowledge. And this is the new theory of epistemology, and it's also the beginnings of modern psychology. Okay, and then there's the quote. Thoughts without content are empty, intuitions without concepts are blind. Okay, the critique of pure reason, this is the Norman Kemp Smith, it's really the standard one out there. It came out in two versions, a revised version, which is the B version, and then the original version, which is the A version. So he's got the paginations both ways. So at A51, B75, which happens to be page 92 in this volume, but in the hardcover it would be a different page, you would find that quote. Okay, so that's what that means. All right, keep in mind that he's now going back to Plato's forms, which are the category, Plato's forms, which are, you know, in the mind and the soul and the categories of space, time, number, color, solid. These are the forms that Plato talked about. And Aristotle's Aristotle said, look, the only way we know a lot of things is because we can actually pick it up and play with it. The form is made substantial in the hiding. Okay? And that's what we're doing here. We're combining those two ideas and saying that knowledge is the synthetic a priori union of the ideas, the forms, the categories, and sense data. All right, so the summary. For Western thought, this is the rise of empiricism, the belief that sense data is the foundation of knowledge, even if it is only probable knowledge. This is David Hume's position. The rise of transcendental idealism, the belief that knowledge is a combination of sense data and ideal categories, concepts, forms. Okay? The further decline of religion and mysticism as publicly accepted sources of knowledge. All right? This is very critical here in the Western world. Continued emphasis on materialism and the physical sciences. Instead of turning inwards towards the soul exclusively for knowledge about transcendent things like God, they continue to turn outwards towards the actual extended world. The ancient mystery religions continue to go further underground, although we now see them coming out into public a little bit in the form of the Freemasons. Descartes' methodical skepticism as a rational alternative to meditation for discovering the true nature of reality is now joined by empiricism and transcendental idealism as additional alternatives. Okay? The belief in suffering is challenged by advances in medicine and science throughout this period. We're starting to see that we can ease suffering, that we can slow down the aging process, that we can extend the lifespan. So maybe, you know, by using our intellect and understanding that stuff out there, we can begin to have a little bit better place here, even if the archons are still trying to confuse us all the time.
And last week's question about the separation from Eastern thought.
Yes. Still, this is an important thing, and it's important because next week we'll talk about Hegel and Nietzsche, okay? And they're going to want to take a look at the concept of progress in general, Western progress. So for Eastern thought, continuation of classical contemplative methods of inquiry, meditation, which turn inward toward God, being, and the soul, which is still practiced in the West, it's just underground, okay? And a continuation of the first noble truth, the existence of suffering in the fallen world. So the East is still basically following the old patterns of thinking, and that is going to lead to a major upheaval and confrontation between the West and the East, like immediately at the beginning of the 19th century, because at that point the revolution in the sciences and the Industrial Revolution has moved far enough that the British Empire, which was founded basically by Queen Elizabeth I, okay, is now able to begin moving out and create the empire that, you know, basically dominated the planet for over a century. Because of this, because the Indians, the Tibetans, the Chinese, everybody else was still sort of stuck in that old idea, in that old, they didn't make that transition. So we'll try to find out what it was in the beginning, in the inception of their system. Because they all come from the same place, you know. The Eastern religions are coming from exactly the same ancient history religions as the Western one. What was different about the Western pathway that they diverged? Okay. And again, so we're still trying to move towards a conclusion about these particular questions, which we'll get to with Hegel and sort of get there with Hegel and Nietzsche. Okay, because they will try to provide understanding of what is going on. All right, any questions or comments? All right, next seminar is going to be the consequences of the great mystery, the world historical figure, the end of history, and the will to power. So Hegel for the first two, will to power, and other things from Nietzsche. All right? And so we'll try to pull it all together. We're now coming towards the modern time frame where we'll begin to, you know, move into the modern era. We'll begin to try to tie everything together. Keep in mind that everything that is happening now is totally related to everything that was happening way back then. It is a single, unbroken, continuous line. And everything that they were describing in 6000 BC, we still have access to. We can practice exactly what they practiced and get exactly the same results that they did. Exactly the same results. And then we have the benefit, well, it's benefits of modern technology and modern science. All right, because during the 17th century, we began to take a different path from the ancients. And that has led us from the 17th century to the 21st century to where we are now. Okay, any questions or comments? Yeah.
I just wondered how you got involved in this.
One of my degrees is in philosophy.
And so you developed all of this?
Yeah, well, this is
A basic?
yeah, this is, I mean, we have, like I said at the very beginning, this place is an intelligence test, first and foremost. if your intelligence is not developed to the point where you can begin to deal with these kinds of concepts, it's going to be difficult for us, to do anything. We will be easy to deceive. Okay, we'll be easy to mislead. We'll be, and we will sort of be floundering around when that moment of separation comes, because we want to practice all of these things and are getting ready for, that moment when this particular avatar's lifespan is concluded. So the first thing we have to do is we have to recognize that we're not in this alone. There have been the most brilliant minds, men and women, from the very beginning of humankind that have dealt with these problems. And we have access to all of that stuff. At this point in history, nothing is hidden from us. There really isn't anything that we cannot find. Everything is out in the open. Probably that will not last. But at the moment, everything is available to us. So we can put it all together. And with that information, we can now begin to, to take part in this ongoing discussion. If we understand the rules, if we understand the basis, if we understand the terminology, if we understand what's really going on here. Remember that Heraclitus talked about, Parmenides talked about the way of truth and the way of opinion. Okay, the way of truth is the way inward. The way of truth is the way of reason. The way of truth is this way here. The way of opinion is the one that is given to us. Okay, if we sit around and wait for someone else to tell us what to think, we are in big trouble. Because there's lots of people out there who will be more than happy to tell us what to think. Okay? And so we get we're in the world of opinion from the time we're born until the time we step outside of it and deliberately set foot on the path of truth. When we say, okay, I understand that the world of opinion is out there, and that, this is what you think is going on. I'm going to go find out for myself what's really happening here. Okay? And so this is the divergence here. The philosopher always takes that divergent path towards the truth. And it's always the same path. Even though ultimately, we always want to turn back towards the extended universe, because that's where we live right now. Right? Even the Buddha, after he had achieved the 8th meditative absorption, did not leave. He came back, and he stuck around for another 50 years. Why? Because this is where the action is. All right? So we're not abandoning this place. We're trying to understand this place. And we're using all of these methods, the ancient methods as well as the modern methods of inquiry, to understand this place right now, this minute. And so that's what we're doing. So that's why I developed a program. Okay? In any epoch, in any era, in any culture, in any time, this is what we would need to do. And it would always be external to the world of opinion. It has to be provided externally. Because the world of opinion is there as a control mechanism for, the governance of the people. And so, government, order of the mind of the people, control of the mind. So what we have to do is we have to understand that there is another path, and that it is available to us, and all we have to do is just sort of recognize it and start walking. Yeah.
So this is all available to us now. You think it'll go underground again?
Yes, I think that very, very shortly. Well, because this leads to rebellion. Okay, I mean that's why they killed Socrates. They killed Socrates because he could incite rebellion in the youth of Athens against the new tyranny that had arisen. Okay, so that's why they rounded him up and said, okay, you got to stop telling the youth all this stuff because they're getting feisty. So you either go away and we'll let you live, or we're going to kill you. Okay.
So how will it go underground? I mean, you have computers and...
But right now you have access to the free internet.
Right.
And you can go anywhere you want. very shortly, the entire world will probably be under a Chinese model, where you will only have access to those websites that they want you to have access to. You will not have free access to everything that's out there. So, like I said, and so that's why we need to get it out there now. You need to understand, everyone needs to understand what is happening, and we need to have the intellectual tools and the spiritual tools to navigate our way through whatever comes. And like I said, it doesn't matter if we were living in, ancient Egypt in 3200 BCE. Same problem. This is a human problem. This is a problem of being human, no matter what epoch we live in. That's what the Gnostics were telling us. That's what the Buddha was telling us. Hey, this place has certain features to it. They seem to be design features. Suffering, pain, deception, deceit, power, violence, all those kinds of things seem to be built into the system as elements of the test, as elements of the training. So we need to understand what's going on. And we need to have the tools and the training in order to make it successfully through this test, both individually and collectively. So did that answer your question? Yeah. So that's why I put the program together. I mean, basically, we suffer. That is the primary feature of human existence at any given time. And so we need to understand how we can sort of mitigate that suffering. And we need to understand the methods and techniques that we can utilize to mitigate that suffering as much as we can. And we need to train other people in the same techniques and the same methods. It doesn't matter who's in charge. It never has. Okay? Every government in history always devolves into a tyranny. Always. Every single time. Take a look at your standard history books. That's what you're looking at. You're looking at an unbroken line of tyrannical behavior. Okay, so again, it doesn't matter. We could be living then, we could be living now, we could be living in the future. These are the human condition. This is the human condition that we need to learn how to deal with. And one of the things that we have to recognize is what the Gnostics were trying to tell us way, way, way back. There are layers and layers and layers and layers of deceit and deception that are deliberately placed there. Okay? Remember that I called it the Narrow Gate Alliance because of the Matthew quotes. Okay? For narrow is the gate, and straight is the way that leadeth unto life, and few are they which find it. Okay? The two words, narrowed and straightened. Okay, they don't mean narrow and straight as opposed to crooked. They mean deliberately hidden. That's what the ancient terms mean. Narrowed and straight. The gate is narrowed and straightened. The way is narrowed and straightened, deliberately obscured, deliberately hidden. Okay? And few there be that find it. So that's the first level of the test is an intelligence test. You got to find it first. You have to know how to read the map. You have to know how to understand what these people are trying to tell us. And what they are trying to tell us is exactly the same no matter when we look at them. It's always the same message. There are two things. We have a spiritual side and we have a physical side. Okay? We're in this place of pain and suffering together. Okay? Because of the nature of this place and also the nature of government in general, governments always tend to devolve into tyrannies. So we have to recognize that, and we have to deal with that no matter what time we're living in. And we have to recognize all of the stuff that's going on. And we have to be aware of historic. That's where we're going to take a look at Hegel, and we're going to take a look at Nietzsche, because they're going to point out to us these paths, these currents in history that we can trace all the way back to the beginning, that led from the beginning to the present day. Okay? And so that's why we're doing all of this stuff. So that we can be more prepared, so that we can understand what we're doing. The hypnosis, the meditation, the philosophy provide us the tools so that we can begin to mitigate some of the pain and suffering that we may encounter. And we will encounter it. Even in a utopia. Even if this place were absolute, perfect utopia in the world, we would still suffer, age, grow sick, and die, no matter what.
So do all philosophers get into the meditation?
Yes.
And hypnosis?
Absolutely, they're all trained in it, even though they don't specifically mention it. They're all trained in it because every single one of them is a member of one of these secret societies.
But I mean, like today.
Yes.
you
Well,
know, those-
you'll be able to tell the ones that do. Okay, there is this mainline philosophy, and then you've got all these Weltanschauung philosophies out here, and you'll be able to tell the difference because the ones who actually practice this stuff, they'll make reference to it, whereas the Weltanschauung philosophers are simply talking about current events, and they're attempting to persuade you.
And what is the term, the world?
Weltanschauung. Okay, and this is a term that comes to us from the 19th century. Welt on. Oops. Okay, and Anschau is a viewpoint. Okay? Anschau, show. Okay? And Anschauung is a viewpoint. A Weltanschauung is a world viewpoint. It's a worldview. So they're not concerned with metaphysics, and they're not concerned with epistemology, and they're not concerned with ethics, and they're not concerned with any of these things. They're concerned with applying the analytical techniques of philosophy to current events. Should we have a war with Iraq? Okay. For example, a simple Weltanschauung that we're sort of considering right now. We haven't seen it yet, but we'll see it pretty soon. The news channels will trot out some religious leaders, okay? Catholic religious leaders, whoever. Muslim leaders, Mormon leaders, whoever. They're going to bring them out, they're going to trot them out, they're going to sit them down in front of the camera, and those people are going to look in the camera and say, this war with whomever is justified, is morally justified. They did that with the war in Iraq, if you recall. Okay, so this is Weltanschauung philosophy. This is not concerned with the overarching problems of human existence. This is concerned with utilizing the technologies of philosophy, which are obviously very powerful, in persuading the public to follow a certain course of action or to adopt a certain opinion. And that's what you'll see. I don't know when, but you'll see it. And when you see it, you'll recognize it for what it is. Okay? You'll see bioethicists out there arguing, like recently, there was a paper that appeared from two Australian bioethicists that argued for a position which would make it legal to kill 3-year-olds. Because 3-year-olds are not any different than an embryo, a placenta, a fetus. Because they haven't contributed anything to society. Okay, I'm serious. This is a serious article by 2 PhD bioethicists appearing in the premier journal of bioethics. And they're serious about it. You will see, if you go back to 2005, you'll see another bioethicist who happens to be Rahm Emanuel's brother. Rahm Emanuel was the Barack Obama's chief of staff, now he's mayor of Chicago. His brother is a medical doctor, a bioethicist, and he argues that in the future, medical care has to be triaged and apportioned. And mathematically speaking, it can only be given to people between 15 and 42. Because at 15, you're old enough to be able to be productive. And at 42, you're starting to cost too much. So if you get sick when you're 14 or younger, they'll just let you die. If you get sick after you're 42, they will kill you. They'll euthanize you. Okay? We can go back and take a look at, yeah, but these are serious people who are actually in charge of the place. They actually make policy. We can go back to a newsreel. George Bernard Shaw, okay, who was one of the founding members of the Fabian Society. And he is there, he's this old, ancient-looking guy who can hardly stand up and is talking very, slowly and methodically. He says, there will come a time when we will haul you in front of us and we will say, sir or madam, what have you done to justify your existence? And if you can't justify your existence, we will take you into the next room and kill you because you are a burden on society. And he says this. You can go out and look at it on YouTube. It's amazing. So these are the kind of things with which we are now encountering in our experience. We haven't encountered them before. The roots of them are out there. If you want to go trace them back, you can see them because they crop up every so often. Thomas Malthus was writing in the 17th century, and he was saying exactly the same thing. We have to get rid of the poor. They don't contribute to society. What's the best way to get rid of the poor? Well, we can't just round them up and shoot them, okay, because the rest of the public would sort of get antsy about that. But we can gather them all together and put them in housing developments that we deliberately build in a shoddy fashion and keep cold and don't give them access to medical care, food, or heat. And what will happen to them? Well, they'll get sick and die within about 3 months. Okay? How do you eliminate poverty? Absolutely, get rid of the poor. That will eliminate poverty. That's what the war on poverty was all about. The war on poverty, the Great Society, all that stuff. If you go back and actually take a look at the white papers that they're writing at the time, they will come flat out and say it. Got to get rid of these people. So anyway, that's what we're doing here. That is, we are now tracing the primary line of philosophical thinking, which is concerned with this distinction between, the thinking substance which we are and the extended substance which we encounter and live in through this avatar, okay, and the ethical and epistemological and ontological considerations that we encounter right now, this minute, in our own lives, because we have to enter into a discussion here. We have to become active in this. We can no longer, at this point in our history, we can no longer relax and let, Fox News and CNN provide us tell us what to think. Because if we do, they'll take us right off the cliff. We have to stop, stand back, and say, wait a minute, what are you really saying? Where are you really going? So on and so forth. And this is the way that we do that. By using the philosophical techniques, by using the methods of meditation and hypnosis, by getting strong and solid and centered for the challenges which are coming. And again, like I said, it wouldn't matter, it doesn't matter which epoch we arrive here. We will face these same problems no matter what. We always have. And these are the techniques that we've always used to deal with them at that particular point in time.
Well, it's one thing to be able to think things through, but where do you get the facts to think about?
The facts are there.
How do you know what facts that were being offered are really true?
Well, you don't. You adopt a skeptical position. You assume that everything is false.
It appears to be.
Until you get confirmation. Okay? The alchemists talk about, because remember, they're writing things that are deliberately obscure. So a real alchemist comes out and says, look, if you want to understand what the alchemists are writing, you have to recognize that there is a handful of real alchemists who are writing the truth. There's whole bunches of alchemists out there who are deliberately obscuring things. So part of it's true and part of it's nonsense. And then there are a bunch of wannabes out there who are just writing nonsense. So how do you tell the difference if you're just starting with this and you don't have access to anything else? Well, you read everything, and where there are intersections, where they agree, that you put down as a data point. Until finally you will be able to reconstruct the entire edifice of true alchemy from the intersection of all of these data points. So that's what you have to do. You have to look at everything Assume that it's not true until it's been confirmed at least once. If it's confirmed 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times, then you've got a data point with a lot of confirmation. Then you set it aside over here and start taking a look at it to see if it's real. Okay? And always you take a look at what you actually experience. Do not rely on opinion. Rely on your own experience. Go out and have your own experience. And rely on that, because that will be accurate. Because the categories that we use to construct our experience are real, and they will provide us accurate interpretations, an accurate representation of whatever's going on out there. Okay, especially if we're skeptical at the same time. Okay, the mind of God will not let us be deceived if we rely on our own experience. It just won't. Go out and look. Don't listen to what they say, look at what they do. Don't listen to what they say is going to happen, look at what really happens. Okay? Look at what they say in their journals, in their articles, in their biographies. Because they'll tell us the truth there. They will actually come out and tell us. Okay, FDR comes out and says, look, you have to understand, nothing happens by accident here. Nothing. Everything that happens is a design. Everything. Nothing on this planet happens by accident anymore. Not even earthquakes and hurricanes. Nothing happens by accident. It is all the result of a design, of a plan. In many cases, it's a plan that's going back 2 or 3 centuries that is just now coming to fruition. So you have to look at the ancient documents. You have to look at the ancient documents. You have to look at documents from the 19th century where they're talking about all this stuff. You have to go look at what they were saying to each other. So read Foreign Affairs, which is the monthly journal from the Council on Foreign Relations. They will flat out tell you exactly what they're going to do, because they set policy for the United States government and others. So they'll tell you what they're going to do. And why are they putting it in a public journal? Because they know most of the public will not read it. But it's there. It's on their website. Go ahead and take a look at their website. A lot of their stuff is available free. A lot of their archive stuff is really interesting to go through and look at. Because you can look at the archive stuff from the 1930s and say, wow, they said they were going to do this and they did it in 1954. Okay, so if they tell us they're going to do something, they are going to do it. It's their way of sort of getting us ready for whatever it is that they're doing. And again, this is no different than it would have been in ancient Egypt, in ancient Sumeria, in ancient Greece, in ancient Rome. It's all the same. It's all exactly the same thing. It's just that now we happen to have access to all of this really cool technology, and there happen to be many more of us around.
They being the government?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the people in power, the government officials, the bureaucrats, the bankers who are on top of them because they control the money supply and own everything, basically. I mean, if we take a look at, for example, rough estimates, because we really don't know, but rough estimates, the Rothschild family has about $300 trillion worth of assets. So does the British royal family, 300 trillion. The Dutch royal family has about 180 trillion. In real assets, paintings, land, buildings, sculptures, city parks, roadways, mountains. Okay? So we're looking at an accumulation of wealth that we can trace all the way back in many instances to the Roman Empire. It probably goes back before that, but we can actually trace it historically back. They've got the documents. And so they've been accumulating wealth for 2,100 years. Wealth and power. That's how it works. And that's why they're where they are and we're where we are. Because our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents didn't have the opportunity to accumulate all this massive wealth. Okay? So, historically, like I said, everything that's happening today, we can trace back to the ancient, whatever, the inception way back. It is an unbroken line. And that's one of the things that we have to understand, and one of the things that Descartes and Kant and Hume and everybody else were trying to tell us. This place is not accidental. It is necessary. Everything that happens is necessary. It's not accidental. It's accidental that, you know, I have glasses, okay, and my hair is a certain color, but my existence is not accidental, and things that happen in the real world are not accidental. They're planned. They're necessary because they're planned, and then they're implemented. So it's a big business plan. And if we want to get involved in the discussion for real, we have to understand what's really going on. We have to look at what those people who are actually making the decisions are saying, and then we can get involved in the discussion. Otherwise, we're just outsiders who don't have any, you know, we're just people who have opinions. And the opinions are worthless because they're given to us by other people for the direct purpose of deceiving us. Okay? The truth is the only thing that matters, and that we have to go out and find deliberately.
You said earthquakes and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So somebody's planning those?
Somebody plans many of them, yes. Yeah, we have the technology. The technology here was created in 1992. It was finally put online. It's called the HARP up in Alaska. The high, what does HARP stand for? High Altitude Auroral Research Project. And it is a Tesla device. It is a device based on the science of Nikola Tesla. And it is these, I can't remember how many, 190 transmitting antennas in a grid, in a huge array. And what they can do with this thing is they can actually change the weather, they can modify the ionosphere, they can bounce it all over the place and communicate all the way around the planet. They can target it at certain locations where the geological structure is unstable and trigger off an earthquake. So these are things that are available technologically speaking, that were not available 200 years ago, but that are available now because of the
So
massive
those
advances.
earthquakes weren't planned then, but they can be.